Then there was the other side of what was going on during that period historically, the conscription of conscience, the turning everybody into a kind of recruit for the cause, the overcoming of the establishment and all that sort of stuff. I've forever been called a fascist and various stuff of that sort because I wouldn't take part in collective phenomena. Being an only child and a lone wolf, I wouldn't have anything to do with it. And also where I first heard demonstrations, they were against me. This poem is called Demo. No, not from me, never. Not a step in your march, not a vowel in your unison. Bray that shifts to bay. Banners sailing a street river. Power in advance of a vote. Go choke on these quatrain tablets. I grant you no claim ever. Not if you pushed the Christ child as president of Rock Candy Mountain, or yelled for the found elixir would your caste expectations snare me. Superhuman with accusation, you would conscript me to a world of people spat on, people hiding ahead of oncoming poetry. Whatever class is your screen, I'm from several lower. To your rigged fashions, I'm pariah. Nothing a mob does is clean. Not at first, not when slowed to a media, not when police. The first demos I saw before placards were against me, alone for 2 years with chants, every day with half-conciliatory needling in between, an aloof moral cowardice holding skirts away. I learned your world order then. But on the other hand, a more positive hand, I hope, was a few years later when there was a bit of a run in the newspapers on taking and demonising individual women. One of the first was Lindy Chamberlain, who really got the business in the newspapers and on TV and so on, as that bitch who murdered her child and so on. All of which was the most patent nonsense. You could tell it was patent nonsense from day one. And in my valley I come from, there was actually a little boy who's still alive now, about my age, who was attacked by a dingo when he was 3. Aborigines all know that little children are taken by dingoes. In fact, the old owner of Ayers Rock, Nipper Winmart, he said, that baby, she gone, she finished. Dingo didn't get that baby. And then there were Helen Darville and the red-headed woman from Queensland, whose name I'm having trouble remembering, Hanson, and various human targets, legitimate targets. They were put up as targets and then shot to pieces by the media. And I wrote this poem about all this called A Deployment of Fashion. In Australia, a lone woman is being crucified by the press at any given moment. With no unedited right of reply, she is cast out into Aboriginal space. It is always for a defect in weeping. She hasn't wept on cue, or she won't weep correctly. There's a moment when the sharks are still butting her, testing her protection, when the Labor Party or influence can still save her. Not the church, not other parties. Even at that stage, few men can rescue her. Then she goes down, overwhelmed in the feasting grins of pressmen and press women who've moved from being owned by men to being owned by fashion. These are more deeply merciless. She is rogue property. She must be taught her weeping. It is done for the millions. Sometimes the millions join in with jokes. How to get a baby in the Northern Territory? Just stick your finger down a dingo's throat. Most times, though, the millions stay money. And the jokes are snobbish media jokes. Kimi Denko, the Oxley moron, spittle like the flies on Black Mary. After the feeding frenzy, sometimes a ruefully balanced last lick precedes the next selection. I'm proud to say that there was a bit of a rest from that. I mean, it didn't happen so much for a while afterwards. It was as if a few people took note of it. I remember hearing that some of the senior feminists said, "Yeah, Murray's got a point. What did we get this liberation for if it was to tear our sisters to pieces?" So I was rather proud about that. Got myself into a lot of political trouble in the 90s, though. I'm a bad fella. I was called Howard's poet. And just about then I wrote a poem, which will be the last I'll read to you tonight, called The Holy Show, which is my earliest memory. And I guess it has to do with something I've always worshipped, and that's justice. And I think my parents inculcated that into me, and that whole world I came from, that feeling of there should be no privilege which protects you from justice. The Holy Show. I was a toddler, wet-combed with my pants buttoned to my shirt, and there were pink and green lights, pretty in the day, a Christmas tree party up the back of the village store. I ran towards it, but big sad people stepped out. They said over me, "It's just like for local kiddies," and Bart let him join in. The kiddies looked frightened, and my parents, caught off guard, one beat behind me, grabbed me up in the great shame of our poverty that they talked about to upset themselves. They were blushing and smiling, cursing me in low voices, "Little bugger, bad boy," for thinking Happy Christmas undivided, whereas it's all owned to buy in parcels and have at home, for still not knowing you don't make a holy show of your family. Outside it, there's only parry and front. Once away, they angrily softened to me, squalling, because I was their kiddie and had been right about the holy show, that models how the world should be and could be, shared, glittering in near focus, right out to the sex frontier. Funny, where I come from. They would not dreamed of writing any of those poems because they wouldn't give it away. You never give your enemy purchase by telling them too much. And I've always been the kind of blabbermouth of my district. I'll say nearly anything, and I'm grateful to. I'm grateful to depressive illness for giving me that privilege, the madman's privilege of telling the truth. And I even get away with it. I get forgiven for it up home. People don't seem to shun me about it. You think, what else to tell you? I'm bound to be forgetting something because I'm making this up as I go along. But I can't think what the level it is. I'll answer it in a question if it comes up there. If you'd like to ask a few, I'd be very grateful because I'm floundering.
When did you first start to write your own material from your own life? Were they the ones that encouraged you to do it?
They probably caused it. They didn't encourage me to do it, but they caused it. I gave them the thanks in this appendix to the book that I should have given them in the main book. There were two English teachers, one of whom died just the other day, Mrs. McLaughlin. Mr. McLaughlin, he's in his 90s and still going. Not exactly strong, but he's still going. He's still perfectly clear. And the sports master is another one. And they could see that I was in trouble socially at school. I guess I was a bit autistic, I didn't have any social training at all. I didn't know how to read people's codes, particularly not female codes. I mean, what man ever completely learns to read female codes? But they, instead of lecturing the kids about it and making my situation much worse, as they could have done, they thought laterally, and they gave me something which would compensate, and that was something they knew that I'd take to like an eagle discovering flight, They showed me poetry, and I was away. I had a means of talking. It took a long time to learn to use it, but it meant that set my compass. I knew where I was going. I made that mistake. I made all the mistakes. No, a few years later I showed them that I wasn't very good by that stage, but they've seen what I've written since, and I occasionally bring it off. I think I got away with a conceded pass in the long run, but particularly with the sportsmaster. He reckoned one of his reasons for telling me about modern Australian poetry, which is what was his contribution. He said, no, not Henry Lawson and that rubbish. He said, I mean real poets, Kenneth Slessor, Judith Wright. So, I started reading these people. That was a fatal stroke. Anyhow, he said it was really because he was afraid that springing over the vaulting horse, I might fall on him and kill him. And, he's a slight man. Yeah.
Not just Australia, but who from Britain?
Oh, good, all sorts of people. I mean, some of them would sound... Well, I hate listing poets because it sounds pretentious. You know, you sound like you're saying, I've read everything, man. I've been to Kubla Kharapa. I've been everywhere, man. But one of my very favourite European poets is actually David Ab William, who's a Welshman. Wrote in Welsh, and I've read him in translation. He's a wonderful craftsman, and he's more than that. He's making that complex, difficult language of Welsh really sing. And a lot of people have done that, but nobody ever did it as well. Another one would be Hesiod, a Greek poet of the 6th century BC. Virgil. Lots of people from before the Reformation. I tend to like Catholic poets from back there, you know. John Calvin captured the world after that, and he don't believe in forgiving anything. He'll kill you on the streets of New York for smoking a cigarette. And, yeah. I came into the world as a free Presbyterian. I know whereof I speak.
More about why you think he's a great poet?
He was another of these fellows who wasn't scared to write no matter what it was. He would write it down straight. They fuck you up, your parents. What is it? They fuck up you. They never mean to, but they do. They fuck you up, your mum and dad. They never mean to, but they do. Nobody was writing quite as frankly as that in quite such straight language in the world. Everybody was pussying around a little bit compared with that. And he did it more than once. And he talked about honest things like throwing in his job and going and living up an alley on windfall apples and sardines. I could have told him all about it. I mean, I could tell him where you stow the sausages up your sleeves and the flat cheese around your waist and all, you know. No, I liked his honesty. They reckon he was a terrible curmudgeon to get along with, but most of us are. Poets are a menace, you know. Yeah.
When you write a poem, does an idea come into your head, or do you just sit down and you don't really know?
Can come in any order. It can come in the ideas. It can come in the music, the structures, anything at all. As long as it gets finished, as long as it ends up finished, doesn't matter where it starts. As you start writing, if the poem's a real one and wants to be written, it'll supply itself. The brain will dip up exactly what you need, and then a bit more. You should be writing a little bit beyond your intelligence at any given moment. You should be going a bit beyond yourself. That's a fair test, I think. If you're writing entirely within your understanding, you're probably writing mediocrity. If you're finding new territory, it's a sign that you might be getting somewhere. I find that a reasonably reliable rule. Yeah. But it don't matter. Yeah.
As an artist, as a creative person, if you weren't a poet, what sort of other artist would you be?
Painter. I wanted to be, I just couldn't paint. There's only one thing between me and the canvas, you know, that keeping me from the canvas, and worldwide genius. I couldn't paint. I know nothing of music. Somebody asked me yesterday what music I liked, and I said I had to ask my wife. And yeah.
What sort of imagery would you paint?
Oh, probably much the same. I don't know. I'd be finding my way into more abstract things, perhaps, and more pattern. I love pattern, and there's lots of pattern that's hard to do in that way, at least in words. Although there are ways, you know. The puzzle is there, it's set. You know, you say, I brought a nice double shuffle off there. The time they get round to the other side of that poem, they'll be wishing that they'd studied more about Maurits Escher's drawings. And no, I love painting in visual arts. It was never going to be ballet. Never going to be ballet. I only learned the other day that the man the man never rises up on his toes. He always keeps his heels on the ground. That's all I know about that. Yeah, where I don't know, I really, truly don't know. Yeah.
Were there poets and storytellers amongst your forebears?
Oh God, yes, it was a matter of shutting them up. Particularly the men, they'd tell stories all night. And my dad was a genius storyteller. Never read anything. He claimed to have read half a book. It was about, as far as he could remember, it was about bushrangers. And no, they weren't literate kind of people. They were storytellers, gossips, and musicians. A lot of them are musical folk, play fiddles or sing, or particularly playing fiddles. And the only place they weren't allowed to sing much was in church. They were only supposed to sing the psalms. And you didn't so much sing the psalms as drone them. But, yeah, interesting. It's an interesting culture, the Scotch Australian culture. It dominates Canada and various places too. The Scots have got an enormous empire around the world. Yeah, sorry?
With animals, especially in learning human, and it's a working relationship that you describe, like in a working force.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could talk a bit about animals in your work.
I grew up with them. No human brothers and sisters. I had to make do what was there, you know. I can still follow the signals and stuff of a lot of creatures. And I seem to be having birds on my hand a lot lately. You know, birds that fly into our house and hit the window and hit the floor, and then the next thing which would happen would be the cat would eat them. So I've got to get them first and hold them until they come back to consciousness. And the next book is probably going to have a forest kingfisher on my finger. There's lots of birds end up on my finger. Because I'm good at it, we've got two children who are long-sighted. One child who is long-sighted, and she and I are very good catchers of birds out of the air, you know. The other, the rest of the family is all short-sighted, and they can't catch a bird with a dam. You've got to be long-sighted for it. But no, it's good. I like the fellowship of creatures. There are lots of trees in my work and stuff, but that's all because of growing up in the bush and going back there. Yeah.
How long did it take for you to feel confident as a poet?
That's a good question. Quite a long time. 20 years, 25 years. The whole of my career sometimes. I've brought off at least 3 poems that I think are probably all right. Yeah, it varies from the mood you're in too. You know. I was counting them up one day thinking, how many really good poems have I written? What's my 12 best poems? Driving up the Pacific Highway, I got to number 9 and couldn't think of what number 10 was. And I said, that's terrific. It means that I've got so many more years of life in me because I got those other 3 to write. Yeah. I've written 1 good long poem and a few good short ones, you know. And even 1 or 2 decent essays before I gave up essays. That might be of interest to tell you. In fact, because of the complete draining of your energy, you know, energy runs out the bottom of you as if the bottom fell out. I couldn't write prose anymore. And also because madness showed up everywhere in it. When I tried to write an essay, it would get full of exaggerations and overstatements and unbalance. And I thought, I've got to stop this. I'm only qualified to write poetry because poetry is strong enough to take me by the shoulders and guide me and make me not write bullshit, you know. I would write only the right kind of bullshit, but prose, I can't trust it. Yeah.
The poem, How the Boys Stole the Funeral.
That's the one. The Boys Who Stole the Funeral, yeah. That was the bad one. The bad long poem. Yeah. What did you want? Huh? It's the bad long poem. The good long poem is called Freddie Neptune. If I get to live long enough, I might write a third long poem. Whether it'll be good or not, I don't know. Already, senility is beginning to move in. Yeah. Sure.
Was it a hard decision as an adult to move back to where you grew up, given your difficult childhood?
It was a mixed decision, as these things tend to be. I wanted to go back before it happened, but at that point where we were just getting able to afford it, my father was getting to need us a bit. He was living up there on his own, and he would neglect himself to death. You know, he'd one stage he had cataracts, and he was quite prepared to lie on the bed until he died. I dragged him off down to Sydney Eye Hospital and got his eyes fixed. You know, he just didn't want to live. And we knew that with a bit of TLC he would live longer, so I wanted to get up there. And then our fourth child was diagnosed with autism. And we had to stay in Sydney where we thought the best care for such people was to be found. And it was for a while. He went to the autistic special school over in Forestville in Sydney. And it was holy hell, it really was. The first few years of bringing up an autistic child is, it is hard work. And gradually they learn a bit of discretion, you know. And then we found that Taree, which is the nearest town to us, the nearest biggish town, had very good facilities for the mentally handicapped. And I made the unfortunate quip that Taree was an excellent place if you weren't the full quid, you know. It is. It has wonderful care for. There's a lot of Down syndrome. People get born up there, and Alexander was, I think, pretty much the only autie in their special school, and he now lives there. He's got a flat there and looks after himself very proudly. He's a householder of his own, and he's a well-organised person with his limitations and his enormously surprising gifts that he can sometimes do. Like, I went to England once, he and a couple of the other children and my wife and I, and he said, "Dad, the sun is in the south at noon here, isn't it?" "That's right, Al, yes it is." And he made no mistakes at all as to orientation. I do. I mean, I get out of a car and I've been driving the wrong way for hours because north is there, isn't it? No, it ain't, it's there. A lot of Northern Hemisphere people get disoriented like that in Australia too. Alexander has never been disoriented.
Just about the long poems, the good long poem and the bad long poem.
Yeah.
What is the difference in their making?
What was wrong with the bad long poem is mainly that it had a clunky structure. I tried to write it out of sonnets, and so the structure of the poem was getting in the way of the reading of the poem all the time. It wasn't that one character in there so much as that caused a certain amount of kerfuffle, but it was that I had unnecessarily taken the smooth out of the statue, you know, and there was no good artistic reason for it. And the good one, I did the opposite. I thought, I'm not going to interfere with this poem. I'm going to let it feed itself to me from that mysterious country, you know. Let Freddie tell me the poem. And which he did, stanza by stanza. And when I felt that it wasn't genuine, when it had slipped off its rails, you know, and was going somewhere wrong, I would stop and go back and find where it had slipped off and then start again there. And I got told the whole poem at the speed the poem wanted to tell itself, and it was about 5 years. And right on the last page, I still didn't know what was going to happen to Fred, or that was going to be the last page. And it revealed itself to me before we got to the bottom of the page, and Fred never came back. He never sort of walked back in and said, "Oh, there's a bit more I wanted to tell you." He was satisfied his story was told. You know. And I was pleased with that. I thought that's a sign that it dictated itself, ruled itself, structured itself. And I'd been training myself in a way all my life to have such a visitation. Of course, there's no such thing as clairvoyance.
Please take the sign. Please take that.